Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks and welcome to my YouTube channel, The History Squad. Now the film today is about logistics. Now I'd already made a film about arrow supply and that kind of thing, and people found it very, very interesting, and subscribers have been getting in touch asking lots of questions about this particular subject. So we thought we'd give it a try answering them. So this is a little bit of question answer session. Now the first question, the biggie, was, well, how did they make the arrows? Now I have enough equipment here to make 2 sheaves of arrows. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a separate film, show you how I make arrows, and we'll incorporate into that the history of what we know about medieval arrow making. Yeah. Now the next question was, well, where were the arrows made? Yeah. And you've got to understand, we have so much information. Almost blew my mind. It's the medieval inventories of the Tower armouries of 1320 to 1410. It's all written down. It's amazing. Yeah. So here we have just one table, and there is a hub, Bristol. So it's around the Bristol area, all of the arrows being made and then brought into Bristol as a hub. But the list of towns, it kind of reveals something. For instance, Wells in Somerset is not listed as making arrows. It makes 120 bows, which I find nice because Richard Head, a great bowyer, he's from that area. But now you go through Somerton, Bridgewater, Taunton, Sherborne, Fleetbridge, they're all supplying sheaves of arrows. You take Taunton, 180 sheaves of arrows were delivered to Bristol. Now they were carted to Bristol. They would then be signed for. Now it might just be a wagon filled with sheaves of arrows, but at Bristol they manufactured for themselves 153 sheaves of arrows. And what happened at these hubs is they were packed correctly. They were put into tons, into barrels, empty barrels, coffers, the chests, and then an interesting one for me, hutches and pipes. I can only assume that a hutch is some kind of box and a pipe is literally a tube that the arrows were put in. If you know any different, please let me know. But once they're secured, they are then going to be transported all the way from Bristol to the Tower of London. And it wasn't an ad hoc thing. It's quite interesting. And I've got to refer to another piece here, because the way the arrows were assembled and transported, it's strictly governed. The goods being assembled and then packed, it gives a table of how much it cost to transport the arrows. And it goes all over the country explaining how much it cost. I'm going to price it for you. Basically, this is what happened. You had a clerk, and he was responsible, once the arrows had been collected, stored in boxes, put onto wagons, he was there ticking it all off. Once it was complete, with the horses, with the wagons, he would go with the supplies. Now, they were paid up front to transport these arrows all the way to the Tower of London, which could take weeks, couldn't it, with all these carts? And you have these tables listing how many horses, how many carts, this, that, and the other. Now, when the clerk arrives in London, his shipment is checked, and he then gets the clerk at the other end to actually sign off the arrows, or the supply of arrows and bows. He then, with his wagons, turns around and goes back. What I find fascinating is he is still paid for the return journey. It's not a case of he just delivers the arrows and then has to go back. The case is the whole journey there and back is bought and paid for. This I find so fascinating. It is so organized. So another question was, how much do arrows cost? Well, we know exactly how much they cost at a particular time, around about the Cressy time, because William de Rothwell kept meticulous records. And I've got the records here, 1353 to 60. It's recorded how much the arrows cost. I'll just go through the table. It's quite incredible. 400 sheaves at 2 shillings and 6pence a sheaf for the king's valets. That's his men, his close men. That's incredible. 2 and 6, 2 shillings and sixpence. Whereas he had 6,000 sheaves at 18 pennies a sheaf. Now, I suppose I ought to explain a shilling. When I was a kid, a shilling was, wow, it's 12 pence. 12 pennies make a shilling. All right, just thought I'd kind of put that one in there. So you have 6,018 pennies a sheaf, then 5,600 at 16 pennies, then they go down to 13, all the way down to 10 pence a sheaf. So there were different standards of arrows for sure. But have a listen to this, because this answers a little side question somebody asked me about were their posh arrows. A special 4 sheaves of hunting arrows for the king at 6 shillings a sheaf. Then 2 sheaves with broad heads for the queen, fletched with peacock feathers at 10 shillings a sheaf. That's incredible prices. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Here is a war arrow, one of Kevin's homemade, with all the stuff. It's just an arrow to me, a good head though. So let me show you this arrow. I call this my golden arrow. It is a top class arrow. In fact, it's my very first medieval arrow, and it's really well made, one of Richard Head's jobs. So this is the top of the line, this is your best arrow. And it's wonderful to think that the queen would have these delicate, beautiful arrows for hunting, and the king's valets, his household men, would have the top line arrows. So now we know 18 pence a sheaf to 10p a sheaf, depending on how good they are. Now, I'm going to go into another question straight from this. Were the arrows spined? They're making them by the hundreds of thousands. There's no records about spining arrows. And think about it. You're at the Battle of Crécy, Agincourt, Poitiers, and you're thinking, well, I hope the next sheaf of arrows that is given to me is spined to my bow. Let's forget all of that. Let's just be medieval military. You have a baggage train with tens of thousands of arrows. They're not going to be spined. They are going to be a particular length, which I love. It's an L. There's only one medieval arrow in existence, the Westminster arrow, and it's a length of L, E-double-L. And it then gets into this whole business of a cloth yard. You measure it by the length of your arm. So here is a medieval arrow. And would you believe it? The 29 inches of an L goes exactly to that length. And I've been accused of not drawing to the full 30 or 31 inches. Well, if their arrows were only an L long, they didn't draw them that long. Or am I creating questions? Another question was, how did the arrows actually get from the Tower of London over to France where they were needed? And it's all down to one man in 1346 for the Crécy campaign, Thomas Rolleston, who was the king's pavillonier. I think I said that right. Excellent, because this is like take 5, because I keep getting that name wrong. He would take the arrows from the armouries in the Tower of London, get them ready for shipment, everything signed and sealed. And it reminds me of my time in the British Army. You wanted anything, you had to sign for it. You signed for your rifle, you signed for your bullets, you signed for your rations. Even if you had a Land Rover for an hour, you had to sign it out and you had to sign it in. Yeah. So did it begin in the medieval times with all of these arrows going across to France? Now we've actually got so many tables of what was shipped out to France. And this is the second shipment for the Crécy campaign. 1,376 painted bows. Now, we're not 100% sure about painted bows. Were they varnished? Were they heavily waxed? But I have been digging and I've found that there were 734 white bows. And there's a kind of a hint that they preferred white bows because you could see the standard of the wood underneath. Interesting little point. Then there were 13,440 bowstrings and 3,800 sheaves of arrows, all transported across to France. They would have gone to a central location. It could be a town near the coast, and then distributed to the army, which was near the coast. Later on, of course, the hub would have been Calais, and we've even got tables which show you how many arrows and bows were sent for the siege of Calais. If you're interested in this, seriously interested, then it is the Tower Armouries. They have the tables, but there's also a decent book for logistics, Arrowstorm. I've got a copy here, and it's by Richard Wadge. It's a great book. Have a read. So the final question I've got to answer is, how did the arrows get from the hub, Calais, or from the coast, down to where they were needed, where the army was ready for the battle? Well, arrows were being made all of the time as well. Don't forget, in these enormous baggage trains, you had fletchers who will be making arrows, repairing arrows. You have the arrowsmith, the guy who makes the arrowheads. They had mobile forges. So it wasn't a case of, all right, we've got 3,000 sheaves of arrows. Those arrows will be looked after, they'll be repaired, but arrows recovered, arrows that are broken, and then manufacture of arrows. These carts literally loaded up with these sheaves of arrows, but when they arrive, let's say for the Battle of Crécy, you can't put the carts amongst the bowmen. The carts are behind. So how do the arrows get from the carts to the bowmen? So let's break it down into companies. You have a company of bowmen. They will have their own supply of arrows, their carts, and they will be sorted on the carts. Let's grab a sheaf of arrows. Here you go. Here's a sheaf. These will be sorted by the women in the baggage, who will then hand them to the boys. These were mentioned by Shakespeare, Henry V, the boys in the luggage. And the boys will run the arrows into their company and supply the bowmen with the arrows that they needed. And you can imagine, can't you, the panic in these baggage trains. They can hear the French cavalry charging. They can feel the battle. They're giving the arrows out, and they can see the dwindling supply of arrows. So the bowmen will actually know, because the boys in the luggage will be telling them, we've only got a handful left. So they will know that they're going to run out of arrows, so they can either get them out of the dead or the ground, or simply chuck their bows away, lay them down, and draw their sidearms. Right the way from Bristol, Taunton, these places, Staffordshire, Yorkshire, where these things are being made, then they're transported to the Tower of London, all accounted for, then across to France, and then transported down to where the army needs them, and then from the baggage train to the actual bowman himself. The whole system works. So there we have it, my question and answer session about the arrow supply. Now, if you enjoyed the film, please like, share, subscribe. If you're already a subscriber, hey, thanks a million. We're so enjoying the comments. They are great. And we now have a Patreon account, and I've got to give a shout out, or I'm going to give a shout out to some of my new Patreon account holders. We have Austin Post from Los Angeles. Then we have Jake Dubert and the Modest Banana. I think I got the last one right. Okay, but for now, thank you very much. See you soon.